Obsessive-compulsive disorder, aka OCD, is a mental health disorder that affects people of all ages when a person gets caught in a cycle of obsessions and compulsions. This can mean having reoccurring thoughts or sensations that make people feel driven to do something repetitively. Many common activities that people do with OCD include washing their hands repeatedly and even counting things a certain number of times. These activities take a toll on people's lives, basically trapping them in their own skin until their obsessions and compulsions stop. With this disorder, being an anxiety disorder, many treatments are available. For example, people who are living with OCD can go to counseling, guidance, or support groups. They can also take selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors or tricyclic antidepressants. Currently, there is not a found scientific cause for this disability. With this disorder, many statistics were found. For example, 1 to 3% of the U.S. population suffers from OCD, and 1 in every 200 children have this disorder. Also, the age for boys to have symptoms for OCD is 6 to 15 years old, and the age for girls to have symptoms of OCD is 13 or older. Along with children, adults can also have OCD. About 2.2 million adults are affected by this disability. Well, that's all to know about the background and statistics of OCD.
Where would a child turn if they're unsure if they have OCD or not?
Where should they turn?
Yeah, like where should they go to?
I would say, one good place to go is the International OCD Foundation. It's a website, and it just has so many resources. Like, it's people you can contact if you don't want to contact if for some reason you want to do it on your own and find out information. That's a great resource. Also, if you have parents or guardians that you can turn to, those are great resources because they can help reach out to your pediatrician.
What is something you commonly see when working with someone who has OCD?
People, children or adults who have OCD tend to have repetitive motions, habits, patterns, so it's a lot of consistency and routine.
How would you explain OCD and its effects on someone?
Well, OCD stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and that's exactly what it does. A person with OCD obsesses over something, and it becomes compulsive, which means it becomes repetitive. And that's where the rituals and the habits and the routines come in. So, for example, there may be a little paranoia, which means they're always worried about stuff, whether it's real or not. So leaving their house in the morning, they may go back and check that they shut off their coffee pot, or they turned off the toaster, or they didn't leave lights on. And as it progresses, it may start off with checking it once and then leaving, but then if it sticks in their head and locks in, becomes the obsession. So they have to check it 7 times, and usually there's a number associated with the compulsion. So it might be 3 times for somebody, it might be 18 times for somebody, but whatever that number is, anything they obsess over has to be done in that number. What was the second part of that question?
And its effects on someone.
Well, it affects every aspect of their life because, for example, if you're trying to get ready in the morning and you have to do the same thing over and over 18 times, the amount of time it takes you to get out of the house. Or if you develop fears, you may not want to leave the house. Relationships, it may be hard to have a conversation with someone because their mind is always going about what they're obsessing over. So it affects working with someone like that. It affects every single aspect of their life.
In your mind, what does OCD really mean to you?
OCD is a condition, an anxiety condition. It stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and it means that the individual suffering from OCD has difficulty managing their thoughts and their anxiety.
Even though lots of people joke around about OCD a lot, it is a very serious disease that can traumatically affect a person's life. Every single person that has OCD is not the same. The behaviors of this disorder can go from barely noticeable to someone being a complete neurotic and about cleanliness or germs. Even though everything has a good and bad side. It is always good to know what challenges people with OCD face on a daily basis. Most people who live with OCD feel pressure to do little tasks, and they are obligated to ensure that everything is always in line. This can be a bad thing because all that time organizing takes up many hours in someone's life, which could be spent with family or doing homework. Also, these constant feelings can have major stress on a person's whole life, and it could even cause them to do bad on tests because of the distractions that they can't help but pay attention to. Other negative symptoms that happen to people with OCD are isolation, always thinking you're crazy, thinking something bad is going to happen to someone, anger, depression, and resentment towards people such as your family.
These are all very serious symptoms, and they're not usually thought to be symptoms of OCD. Some examples of the tasks people perform with OCD are repeated hand and hair washing. It has been found that some people with obsessive compulsive disorder can wash their hands over 100 times per day. Although washing your hands keeps the germs away, overwashing your hands can lead to physical effects such as skin lesions and infections. Overwashing your hair can lead to scalp lesions that could also become infected as well. Other physical effects a person can experience is exhaustion, which can lead to heart disease, or ulcers, which is a sore that develops on the lining of the esophagus, stomach, or small intestine. Many bad things come with having OCD. That is why it is very important to find help to deal with the hardships of having this disorder.
Does OCD get worse over time?
Yeah, I think anything unchecked can get worse. I think there are OCD has to do with like your brain chemistry. So there are things that can exacerbate it, like stress, can make it worse, can make it more challenging. That's why it's so important to get help and to get those coping mechanisms. And that doesn't mean it's going to go away forever. It might, but if it comes back, you'll know what to do. But that's why anything that is impacting your life in a way that is not letting you live your life to the fullest, the way you want to, is something to talk to a doctor about. And then that way you'll have the tools you need. So if it comes back, it won't feel so scary. It won't feel, because you'll have some sense of control and understanding. And I think that's really such a big part of it, right? Is knowing what's going on with us. Like if you have it, like what's going on, why is it going on, and then what do I do about it? And I think knowledge is really half the battle for that.
Thank you.
Did you like the book?
Yeah, I love the book.
All right, where did everybody else go? Are you all still there?
I'm here to say thank you.
Like all disabilities, there is a bright side to OCD. With OCD, it may be hard to control certain parts of it, but it can make yourself more creative. For example, people with OCD can come up with ideas or scenarios in seconds. Another positive attribute of OCD is having a phenomenal attention to detail. Depending on your OCD, you may pay attention to different things. If harnessed right, a person with OCD can succeed just as well as people who don't have OCD. Think of Donald Trump. He has OCD and he is the President of the United States. He succeeded even with his OCD. David Beckham, the famous soccer player, also has OCD, but that doesn't stop him from playing his game. Justin Timberlake, a great musical artist, also has OCD. He is a very successful pop artist and he is doing great and has OCD. Lastly, people with OCD learn that anything is possible because your brain can mold and make you think differently.
I guess I would say it's one of those things that makes you special, just like anything else, just like braces or being a good student, or I think OCD is part of who a person who has OCD, it's part of who they are. I don't think it defines them, but I think it's one aspect of them that makes them unique. And I think it's important to embrace to recognize that you're not any one trait. You're not OCD. You're not braces.
Last question. How do you help people who have OCD?
Well, typically people with OCD work in concert, which means together with potentially a medication routine and a therapist. At the very least, a therapist. There's a therapy called cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, which is helpful for someone with OCD because it retrains your thinking. It puts strategies into place so you change your behavior by changing your thinking. So you definitely need a professional and someone with experience working with people with OCD.
How can OCD be caused?
Generally, in my experience, it's caused in actually one of two ways. Sometimes people who have quite a number of episodes of strep throat wind up with OCD. The strep throat causes issues with their myelin sheaths on their nerves, and that can create OCD. And OCD is also an anxiety disorder, and sometimes can be caused by trauma, a feeling of a lack of control over situations where a person may need to develop behaviors to help themselves feel like or believe that they have some control.
If there is not an OCD cell, how could it be diagnosed?
It's diagnosed based on behavior and thought patterns.
The lesson to be taken away from this topic is to never judge your peers and that people are more than their disability. Even though they might be different, only a small fraction of people really know what they go through, so it's up to their peers to always make them feel welcome and comfortable. It is important to know that people are more than their disability and to always treat them with respect. Not all people have the same type of OCD, so it's always good to treat everyone equally, because sometimes someone's OCD is barely noticeable, but other times someone's OCD is very noticeable. And so the message to be taken away from this topic is to know that they go through hardships every day and that people with OCD aren't very different from us.
There are other types of OCD besides making everything perfect.
Yes, making everything perfect, checking and rechecking is very common. Also fear of contamination, where you have a person who's afraid of germs. Sometimes fear of mental contamination, where they are afraid of certain thoughts. They call that scrupulosity. When a person may fear that they've had a bad thought or a thought of harm. They may fear they may harm themselves or others, but they are not actively suicidal or homicidal. It's just the thought that they're having. I'd say those are the largest number.
4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28,
I just need to have a cold, the flu, strep, yellow fever, Lyme's disease. I might hurt my mom.
6 left.